Since I never really expected anybody except family to watch these videos, I was, well, at least a little surprised how many are watching the Stag series. So I have a question for those of you who are Stag enthusiasts. The reason I picked a donor car instead of another transmission is I don't want to do any fabrication. I know I'll find out eventually, but do the flywheel housings for the automatic and standard mount up to the block the same way? Well, thanks to anyone who writes with an answer or any other suggestions for me. I have a lift because a few years ago I replaced a clutch in my wife's Kia, and I decided that was the last time I was going to lay on my back and do the repairs. I'm not a mechanic by trade, but I do all the family cars. And now that my back is feeling better, it's time to get under the car and get dirty. The transplant patient is right next door and anxious to receive its new toys. First step, get the last two nuts out of the radiator. Much easier when it's up in the air. And take the radiator out. Well, the next step is getting access to the prop or drive shaft by taking the exhaust out. I fought with several of the bolts on the clamps until I realized that I have a solid stainless exhaust in the new car, and I can't imagine anybody ever wanting these rusty parts. So I broke out the Sawzall, and in just a few minutes of pretending to be a guy stealing catalytic converters, pretty much all the exhaust is gone. All that was left was a couple of piles of rusty, grungy, smoky stuff on the floor, so a little bit of cleanup before I get onto the drive shaft. So I bought a transmission jack because I have to put a transmission in the high ace, and I thought, well, drive shafts are not really heavy, but it would be nice to have two hands working on the nuts and bolts and not have the thing fall out on the floor, so enter the transmission jack to help out. The 8 bolts and nuts all came out just fine. They're all bagged and labeled so that I can put it back together when the time comes. And the lift was really kind of convenient. I just stood there and watched it. The shaft itself looks okay, it's just really dirty. I'm going to clean that all up, check the U-joints, and I don't know, maybe even paint it, make it look pretty. Next was pulling the pin to disconnect the clutch cylinder from the transmission. This resulted in my first skin knuckle. Notice my careful use of the right tool to hammer on the pin to knock it out. A pair of pliers is recommended. When the pin finally let go, I slammed my hand against the frame. A word or two may or may not have been muttered. Notice my careful use again of the pliers to try and knock the pin out. The clutch cylinder looks particularly crusty and is going to need some cleanup at least. Next, I drained the transmission. The transmission oil looked really black, but the pleasant thing is that the plug came out without any real drama. It's always nice when old rusty things come loose. I was a little concerned about all the metal that's on the magnet of the transmission plug. I'm not sure if it's too much. I think most transmission plugs attract quite a bit of little metal chunks, so I'm hoping this isn't too many. And finally, for this video, I started pulling transmission bolts out. I remember when I did the Kia clutch, the bolts all had different lengths and I lost track. So I've decided to label these with kind of where they fit as a little clock face. Well, that's it for this video. I'm trying to keep these kind of short so I don't bore people too much, and I don't do too much in a day. Hopefully the next one I'll be pulling the transmission out of the car. Thanks for watching.